Welcome to Church is Canceled. I'm Brett, and I'm joined by my good friend Danny.
Well, actually, I changed my name to Zordon from the Power Rangers in the
Oh,
yeah.
I didn't get the memo.
It's all good. It was a problematic reference from my youth.
Welcome,
Floating head.
Danny.
Thank you.
Welcome. It's been a long time that we've done a podcast together.
Yeah, only 3 years.
So, and this one I feel like has just been in the works through the many conversations that we have had. It seemed inevitable that a podcast of this nature would come to be for us.
Of course. And there's been a stirring in my spirit.
Has your spirit been stirring?
Listen, throughout the course of this podcast, you will see me at least make light of churchy talk, right?
Sure.
And I just want to lay that out here. This isn't me condemning anybody. This is me just having fun. Okay?
That's what this whole podcast is going to be, Danny.
Completely. And I swear to you, upon all that is good and holy, if one more person prays a hedge of protection, what? Is everybody a landscaper at your church?
Oh, they're so hard to get around. Shrubbery, it's just difficult to get out of your way when you want to.
El Diablo he's sitting there with the pitchfork and he goes, the hedges, they're just too high.
Too tall. Yeah.
All right.
Can't get over that.
Let's jump
jokes aside, do you want to kind of give your thoughts on what this podcast is going to be about? I'll say what I think it's going to be about. We'll talk a little bit about our background and then kind of move into some of the more specifics of what we're going to cover in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. My thoughts are, when it comes to doing this podcast and what it meant to be is, it's called Church is Canceled. It's meant to be a flashy title. But the reason I wanted to do this was I'm actually watching friends, family, kind of, deconstruct their way out of being Christians. And I'm all for hearing, and when I hear their reasoning, it's always dumb. Like I'm for, if someone gave me a good reason, I'd be like, well, I can't argue with a good reason, right? If someone's like, well, I just believe in evolution now, and I don't believe in the creation narrative, so I'm tossing the whole thing out. I mean, I can like, it just scientifically, it doesn't make sense. I'm not a science genius, but I can tell you something. That one also doesn't add up either.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Interesting. A little bit of a side note, you mentioned evolution and deconstructing. I went through a period where I was sort of deconstructing, but what it kept it all there for me was actually the scientific arguments for God. I was convinced that the arguments for God were more convincing, so I remained at least a theist.
Yeah, and then for me though, like I went through a process spiritually where I was stripping everything out, and for me the base layer of it was, there's a gut feeling in here, and I'm just gonna say this much, like the longer I live, the more I learn to trust the gut feeling because everything else is stupid. And every time I don't trust the gut feeling, I pay a price for it, spiritually, financially, or otherwise, most of the time financially. And so for me, this podcast is about, first of all, I love a good scandal. Part of this podcast is we're going to just talk, not an episodic format, but a single episode about some of the kind of most infamous American church scandals because I love them.
Scandals.
And I think for a lot of lovely Christian people who they don't have a thick skin, they have a thin skin about their faith. They look at those scandals and they're like afraid to talk about them. And my response is, if I looked like Carl Lentz and that chick who met me in the park, right? And if I saw her and I had the opportunity to get it in, I would.
Game over. Yeah.
Like, dude, if I'm Carl Lentz and I got the nice hair and I'm kind of yoked for a guy in his 30s and I got all this stuff going on, and then you got your your wife of 20 something years and she just doesn't look at you the same way, right? I'd be like, of course I'm going to get it popping with this person chick, right? Of course. And I think we're so. There's a YouTuber uh, duo. It's not Key and Peele. What am I saying? Completely opposite of those guys. Rhett and Link, lovely guys. They do
Yeah.
Good Mythical Morning and stuff like that. And they did a whole series of like a podcast series on like how they deconstructed. And this is a decade before that term was
Okay.
relevant to the thing. And they gave their reasoning, and I was like, you picked the dumbest reasons. Like you
Yeah.
haven't like so for me, this is about I don't know if this is just me or if there's other people like this, but I've been able to strip back the parts of it that I think are stupid, and it's all church stuff. It's not the
Yeah.
gospel, it's not the Bible, it's not the church fathers, it's always dumb church stuff.
Just extra culture things. So
Correct.
to kind of summarize what you're saying and give a preview, I mean, we're going to talk about all the things Danny has mentioned. We're going to talk about deconstructing.
Correct.
There's going to be a huge focus on church scandals. We're going to go over some of Danny's favorite church scandals.
Right.
We'll tell you what those are going to be in a little bit here. We're just going to talk about church culture and how it has become what it is today, what we think it is today. We are going to poke fun at it. Absolutely. Know that we're just having fun. We don't intend to make fun of God or blaspheme the Holy Spirit or anything like that. There's a difference between church culture and doctrine and behaviors and what the heart of the gospel is. I think my motivation for doing this, Danny, I went to Bible college. We can get a little bit more into our background in a moment here, but there's something incredibly moving and true about the story of the gospel.
Yes.
That I cannot step away from. But there's something that has happened in the church that has made it so unattractive. I remember you, and you can probably say, I don't know who you were talking to. You had a conversation with a pastor. We both worked in sales. And I remember you retelling me the story of the conversation you had with this pastor. And you said, look, man, the church has failed to sell something that is free and is the best gift in all of human history, and that is salvation. How have we failed to sell the best gift for free?
No strings attached.
Yeah.
Just come pick up your free salvation and enjoy everlasting life in the Creator, the entity that created you, that spun all of this in motion. Okay. He created the man that created butt implants.
Yeah, right. There must be a reason.
Praise be, okay? But if we, there was actually an artist named Machine Gun Kelly who's now a pop punk artist.
Yeah.
And he has this video about in one of his music videos, and it's just all these people having this emotional, and he's just calling up all of his fans in the video, and the people are just having this emotional experience, and this guy's packing out stadiums. And I was having this thought, here's these people having this emotional reaction, this guttural bass reaction to music. And if you listen to his first couple of albums, it's like, what's in here that's so. But if we've failed as Christians to drive the narrative of truth to the public, and somehow we've become the villain in society, and I don't get how that. I mean, I understand how that happened on a sociological level.
Sure.
But if we failed to sell the thing it's free, dude. They're giving away free. There's a new Mr. Car Wash that opened in my neighborhood. They're giving away free car washes, line around the block. Okay. We failed. We got something better than a car wash. We're going to car wash your soul. Okay.
Right.
And guess what? You can just have it.
Free towels. The towels are included.
They did give me a chamois. I did get a chamois. Listen, how excited was I for the chamois? It was free. It's $6 on Amazon for a pack of 10.
You looked that up specifically.
Yeah. It's a high quality microfiber, but it's a So you're correct. I mean, we failed to do that. And here's all I'm saying: we're just going to dust ourselves off and keep going.
Yeah.
And in the age of podcasting, and this is such a popular format, there are people having podcasts and live
Yeah.
streams about deconstructing.
Right.
I just wanted to say you can tear away the dumb parts of it, which are all related to church people, lovely, lovely people who want to serve God and spread the gospel, but clearly they're out of time. They're just
Right.
people who have been, they've done a good job of building a hedge of protection from
Stop
society.
it. Stop
They,
it.
they've built a hedge of protection from society, the people they're trying to impact. I grew up in a really, really conservative church, and their whole thing was like, we have to do everything we can, basically like Amish people. Like, we have to run away from,
Right.
and on some level, I get you have kids, you don't want them exposed to the wild stuff that exists in our society.
Teletubbies, Harry Potter,
Power Rangers.
all that.
Yeah,
So you mentioned there are a lot of podcasts out there and people are deconstructing.
right.
We're not really going to do that. I mean, we are going to, as you said, rip away some of the things of church culture,
No, but I'm
really just by making fun of it. And we're going to talk about church scandals.
right.
We're going to do all of that. But why should people listen to us? Can we give a little bit of our background with the
Yeah.
church to help people understand where we're coming from and why we have any kind of credibility?
So I've been raised in the game. I'm just going to say
Raised in
this.
the game.
Yeah. So I refer to church as, and I refer to it as the team, and I refer to it as the game. Right.
Yep.
I've been, I've been, I've been hip to the game off rip. My grandfather came to this country to go to seminary. That has nothing to do with me. It just means that I was born and raised in a culture where this was the uniting thing. This was the thing that kept us, our family. I went to a Christian school as well, University of Northwestern, and
I
I was
believe you obtained a certificate in Christian counseling, did you not?
correct. I did
Which you have used on me more than anyone you know. I have
probably.
I have single-handedly benefited from your certificate in Christian counseling more
Did
than
you
anyone in the world.
did you benefit, or did I send you down a path of self destruction?
I've benefited. I haven't
I hope.
self-destructed,
I
and
hope.
I still have some sort of tie to the
Yeah,
modern day
and
Christian church and faith. So
yeah.
I
I
do
mean,
believe you're a big part of that.
hey, if that's true, praise God. Um, but so my family very Christian. Me, I was raised going to church in my grandfather's basement in Bloomington, Minnesota. You could throw a rocket at the Mall of America. Well, the parking ramp. You can't hit a store from where he lived, but um, down the street from the church where you and I met actually.
Yeah.
And uh, I've helped plant 3 churches. None of them exist anymore. I mean, I guess
You're doing really well.
one technically does exist. It's yeah, that one. Yeah, yeah.
The one on my shirt that our listeners can't see,
Yeah,
which our attorneys have told us we're not allowed to name on the show. So
yeah, and as some of you may have seen, I put out a video making an apology, but I don't know. Yeah, so like I've been going to church for a long time, and recently I ran into somebody like, man, you really need to get into the ministry. I was like, absolutely not. I refuse. I decline. If you remember, you and I went to a singles conference when we used
yeah.
to live together, right? We used to live together in
Yep.
Austin, Texas. Neither of us are there anymore because whoever told you it was cool was lying.
It was cool when we went there
I mean,
in 2014.
it's cool, but I don't know. I hate live music and I hate noise, so whatever. But anyways,
And allergies
yeah, I know.
and the heat.
Well, the
So,
heat didn't bother me. So I forget what I was saying. We went to a
lived
singles.
together. We went to
Yeah,
a singles conference.
we went
Yeah.
to the singles conference at this church that I was going to after I had left the church that we helped start because they said weird race stuff. And I remember
We'll get into that in a later episode.
we will. And I just remember the pastor, I forget what his formal title was, but he was saying basically, young men, single men, you have two choices: buckle down, get married right now, pick one of the girls from the singles, the girls
Just
side,
pick one. Doesn't even matter which one.
right? All of her student loan debt and ex-boyfriends coming
Pick
through,
on all of that.
yeah. Um, or you have to go into vocational ministry. These are your two options. And I think what I said there was the Lord has called me to the air conditioning, so I don't believe I'll be getting into the vocational ministry. Because at that point in time in my life, I didn't think that I was interested in marriage. I mean, I was interested in a
Yeah,
family,
right. I
but I just
remember.
didn't think marriage was for me. And I mean, I'm engaged and I still kind of think that. So I'm kidding. I'm not engaged. I will be married someday and still be like, yeah, I don't think this is for me.
Yeah.
Um,
Are you dating Jesus right now? Is that
no,
what's going
I'm not
on?
doing that because that's weird. There's there's weird idiosyncratic things that we say in church that makes me want to barf, and that's one of them. But for me, though, one of the things was I'm an outsider to evangelical culture because I
Yeah,
was raised in a church where they spoke Malayalam, which is a South Indian language.
right.
I speak the language fluently, but when it comes to the Bible, I understand about 30 or 40% of what's going on.
I remember the first time I heard you speaking Malayali on the phone,
Malayalam, yeah, to my
Malayalam,
father,
and we had known each other for a number of years already.
yeah,
I never knew you spoke another language, and you
yeah. I
were
try to
just
keep
like
it a secret.
discreetly speaking on the phone, and I thought you were an operative for Mossad or something like that. It was wild.
No, I try to get recruited by Mossad several times, but I
Yeah,
can't. I can't pass the physical exam.
that makes
So
sense.
it's not because it's because I have flat feet. So
Oh, right, right, right.
no, but I was an outsider to evangelical culture, and when I left my family's like I went to a small. It's called Plymouth Brethren. So when my grandfather got too old to preach, we started going
Is
to
that
other.
actually like a brethren denomination, right?
It's a non-denominational Christian movement, which we can, Christians cannot get on people's case about pronouns. When I have to describe, because if I say it's a denomination,
Yeah,
somebody's gonna lose pop a gasket. It's
yep.
not a move like because there's no formal structure
Hmm.
and that's why it sucks, kind of. That's why you suck at it. There's no formal structure. There's no
Right.
guy in charge. So that's how I grew up. And I went to those churches, and man, those people are lovely people, but also so incredibly weird. Um, so I go from there and I go, you know what? I want to go somewhere where they got chicks.
That's
So
the number one determining factor of where you go to church, of course.
always, I
Always
mean,
should be as a young man.
I mean, I'm going to say this without any irony or humor at all. If you're a young man, go where the booty is.
Yeah.
I'm just, I like, anyways. So I started going to these big, large mega churches where they had a lot of young people. There was one in Minnesota. It's gone now. I mean, it's there, but not worth attending. Called the Upper Room. Let me
I
tell you
remember.
something,
Yeah.
dude. I
Yeah.
remember telling somebody this place is like a nightclub, and they're like, "Yeah, okay." And then they came with me to church one time, and a girl walked past us in pumps, wearing a glitter
Yeah.
dress, like a small dress, a mini dress.
Yeah.
It was all
A
glittery.
cocktail dress. Yeah.
There you go. And my buddy goes, "Holy crap! It is like a nightclub."
Yeah.
But I hated this.
What was going on in the upper room there, huh? That's what I want to
All
know.
all of the sermons were like this guy was just unlistenable kind of guy.
Yeah.
Nice guy, I'm sure. And the worship was off the chain. Like they had, like I think at one point Carrie Job was doing worship there. I don't remember if that's true. I just
Carrie
know
Job
that.
came to my university once as well. Yeah.
Okay, so here's all I know. There is a multi-platinum recording artist that was doing worship there for a while,
Yeah.
and they would bring in all these kind of left of center speakers to appeal to the audience, and they're Presbyterians. Like they would rent this Presbyterian church out.
Yeah.
It was wild, and so I started going from there, and I started hopping around throughout my 20s and going to big mega churches, all in search of tail. Not going to pretend like that wasn't the case.
At least you're honest.
Yeah, and I think that's if we can all just be that honest and be like, yeah, it's just like, that's the point of this podcast is,
Let's be honest. Yeah, that's the
just
point.
tell the truth, because we can't actually spread the gospel until we're talking about the facts. So, anyways, that's me, man. And then
Yeah.
I ended up being such an outsider because of it's really weird. We were raised in Minnesota. I wasn't Lutheran, which is number
Yeah.
one, and then Catholicism, and then probably number three is Assemblies of God, right? And that's
Sure.
Assemblies of God kind of grew where people ended up in terms of church while we were growing up, right?
Yeah.
So that church that you and I met at actually used to be a school, like a private school that my uncle went to. So like but nonetheless, what I'm driving at here is I ended up being an outsider in my own faith, right?
Mm-hmm.
In my own faith community, I was an outsider because culturally I was an outsider. And it wasn't because I was a brown person. It wasn't because I was the child of immigrants. That just made me a different kind of outsider. Like I still don't know about sports and I don't care. But that made me an outsider in the faith because I didn't grow up going to any of the mainstream churches. And so I never understood. So some of these cultural quirks and features, if you want to, refer to it, I was an outsider to them. And so I have the perspective to say, this is weird.
Yeah.
Right?
So you didn't grow up with the rock concerts and the fog machines,
no,
and anything like that. Yeah, neither did I. I was raised mostly Lutheran.
Yeah.
And found the Assemblies of God late in high school. Had a near-death experience, drinking a lot and smoking synthetic marijuana. I believe they call it K2 now. There's been a lot of K2 overdoses in Austin, Texas, when we lived there. So I drank a bunch, smoked some K2, had an experience where I believed I met God and promised God that if I survived through the night that I would live my life for Him. I don't discount that experience or
I don't either.
Just disagree with it now. Just maybe my perception of who God is and how I'm supposed to relate to God has changed since then. You and I met pretty early on in my Christian life and development. I specifically remember we were at another sort of young adults singles thing.
No, it was a young adults event in Minnesota.
And when we met, I just remember you telling a joke about Calvinists. Would you like to retell it? Because it's gold.
Whenever I meet a Calvinist, I kick him right in the ball sack because it's always a dude, right? It's never
always.
It's young Calvinist men are the IPA of the faith. Right? Tastes like piss and vinegar, and I don't quite understand why anybody likes it. So anyway, whenever I meet a young Calvinist man, just a Calvinist in general, I kick them right in the nutsack, like as hard as I possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
And while they're kneeling on the floor and writhing,
gasping for air,
I put my hand on their shoulder and I say, "Now, why do you think God, before He set the pillars of this earth, He ordained that you should be kicked in the balls this hard on this day?" Because
you said that, and everyone else around looked at you and didn't want to make any comment, right? And that's all. When you say like you've been an outsider in the church, like that's what you mean. You've always been a person who is willing to address the cultural and doctrinal differences and make fun of the church and make fun of the things that didn't make sense, but you did it in a way that was authentic to you. It was hilarious to me, and it made everyone else uncomfortable. And I knew we were going to be great friends then. Because I came in as an outsider as well. Like I was raised Lutheran, but only nominally. It didn't mean anything in my daily life. So
you weren't like confirmed or anything, were you?
No, I was confirmed earlier. Actually, I led confirmation class, but
stop.
But
I didn't know. You can start throwing signs now, can't you?
Yeah. Even
he's
then,
confirmed,
I think. Even then, it's so it just seems like you're just reading words off of a piece of paper in the Lutheran church. That was my experience. So it started to mean more. It got more emotional with the lights and the fog machines.
Correct.
In the Assemblies of God. I went to an Assemblies of God university,
right.
minored in biblical studies, which makes me smarter than 97% of people when it comes to theology and the Bible. That's what a professor told us once. So I'm just sticking with that.
Hey man, you got to claim that. Okay, you got to claim that over your life.
I got that minor for something, right?
Yeah, and you know what I find interesting. Now, I'm going to ask you this, but throughout my life and throughout my experience in church, I've been accused of doing and saying things for attention, and what I've tried to convey to people is, I don't care what you think about me at all. In the course of our friendship, has anyone ever asked you, is Danny for real or is he just doing this for attention?
Yeah, I mean, all the time. Pretty much everyone who's ever met you and I have asked if you are for real, like if your behavior, is that seriously how you are? I'm like, yeah, I live with him. He's that way all the time.
Okay. Yeah, I find that interesting.
And it couldn't be more opposite of what's true. Knowing you can actually be rather reclusive for how boisterous your personality is.
That's
you
correct,
have a reclusive side to you where
you
would shut yourself in your room and I wouldn't see you for days.
Yeah, I know. Well, I would wait till you would go to work because I knew your schedule. Yeah. And then I would open up the door and I would have a guest and then the guest would leave and then
in my bedroom. Yeah, I remember
okay. That's not true. That happened one time. Okay. That's because you had that huge poster on your wall. And I can't get into the nitty gritty details of why that mattered, but yeah.
So in Texas, in the time we were living together, you mentioned having planted a few churches. We helped plant a church. We got involved when there were only maybe 10 or 15 people.
Yeah.
And we helped it grow up to about 100 or so before it did a bank style merger with another church or whatever happened there. I'm not sure.
That was after our time. And you know, that was there was a second church that I helped plant. The first one that I helped plant was really like it was a new worship experience from a different church. So they started a Friday night service that was meant to be more seeker friendly. But then the pastor.
What do you mean when you say seeker friendly? We know what that means.
Right. It just means that the church was designed for people. That service, the Friday night service, was designed. It was in a new building. It was in an office complex instead of at a church building, and it was really just designed to help people who had never gone to church before get started. Now, somewhere along there, the pastor decided at his seeker-friendly service. Now, this guy had at that time 3 campuses. Now it's just 2, but he decided at his seeker-friendly campus, it would be a good idea to start baptizing people in the Holy Spirit that night. So I was like, oh, this is an odd choice for this venue. That church didn't really survive, but ultimately it consisted of the majority of the people who were coming every week were already going to his other churches. So I don't really count that one as having failed. It just ended. The one that I think, the second one that I helped start, I was politely asked to no longer attend.
Is that the one we went to together? The third one, the one in Texas.
No, I'm talking about the one in Minnesota.
Okay.
The second one in Minnesota. I was politely asked not to return, and they said, you know, I think you might be a better fit at your old church. And I said, you know what? I think the same thing. Now, there's that Bible verse.
Can I pause right there? That's one thing I hate that churches and Christians do. They can never give you an honest reason. Like if they thought maybe the things you said, the jokes you told were inappropriate, why can't they just say that? They always have to say things like, well, the Holy Spirit's been speaking to us about you, and God is saying that you may be better suited to influence the kingdom in a different location. That's
so I didn't really have the sensibility to just say, if you don't like me, just say that. If you don't, if I said something that is upsetting to you, just tell me that. I mean, I remember once I was asked to skip a Bible study one time because I had said something in the previous one that they didn't like. And I said, okay, what did I say?
It was like a punishment. You got grounded.
I got detention for one Bible study. And then I said, okay, so you can't share what that was. They said, no, we're not comfortable sharing. I said, that's fine. So I just stopped going to the Bible study altogether. And like 3 or 4 weeks later, they called me and go, hey, we noticed you haven't come around. And I said, listen, if you don't want me to come, if you don't want me to come around for one reason or another, that's fine. And if you can't explain why, I'm accepting of that. I just don't care anymore. Like I don't. So, and that was unrelated to this one. That was actually from a church of us that had a scandal that we'll talk about later.
Uh-huh.
But the church plant that I was asked to leave, the second one, was in Minnesota. Through a series of unfortunate events, I ended up moving back to Minnesota after leaving Austin. I'm in the process.
I thought you moved to an undisclosed location north of Lubbock.
That is also true. Those are also that is a factual statement.
Okay.
The Twin Cities is north of Lubbock, so
That's true.
So and I ended up moving to where very close to where this church had a building. And there's that Bible verse in the Old Testament that says, and the Lord will prepare a table in front of your enemies, or something along those lines.
For you in front of your enemies, yeah.
So I ended up driving past this church, and throughout the unfortunate events of 2020, they had gotten rid of their lead pastor. He went to go work at a bigger mega church for a bigger salary, and they had brought on a predicate felon who was reformed.
Okay.
And this is one of my
So
beefs.
somebody who had been to prison.
Yeah, I don't know if he was a predicate felon or just had the one felony, but this is one of those things that I have a gripe I have about churches is like, hey, there's 1,000 guys who want to do the job, who will do a decent enough job, who are going to do, but we got to pick these scumbags like, hey, he got caught doing something.
I don't know, illegal. Dude. I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's what they also thought. And then he was later accused of stealing PPP money, like taking PPP.
Oh, well, everybody stole PPP money.
Right. Anyhow, so that church ended up getting consumed by a larger mega church from the north, and I just drove by when they had to switch the sign from whatever it was to the new.
You're driving by as the guys are out there taking down the letters off of there.
That's literally what happened.
And that Bible verse came to mind. You said, "Here's the table being prepared for me."
I'm driving by because what ended up happening was the entire church staff, including the individual who was the worship pastor that asked me to leave, quit on the same day when they found out because he just refused to admit that he had done something inappropriate with the money. That's at least what I've heard second or third hand, so I wouldn't know if that's the case. I'm just saying what I've heard.
Okay.
And so all of them lost their job like that in the middle of a really rough time.
Yeah.
And I just thought, isn't that funny how that worked out, that you people asked me to leave? And I think the same thing of the third church that that you and I helped plant.
You were never asked to leave from there.
No, I wasn't. No.
You just left and went to that undisclosed location north of Lubbock.
No, I left before.
Oh yeah, you did. You did leave before. That was hard on me because we had helped start that church together. We had a lot of good friendships. I was in a relationship with a girl from there, and the breakup happened. Most people in the church sided with her.
Yeah.
I was not asked to leave, but I was certainly given the cold shoulder by many.
Right.
And in a church of less than 100 people, and you got to see your ex there every Sunday.
Right, that's right.
Not a great experience anymore. For that reason and all the other reasons that we have quoted, then I began to sort of deconstruct. I had a mentor from college who was very post-Christian. I found, which I know you have your opinions on. I've always found very helpful.
Yeah, I don't.
And who I admire as an individual. So, I'm sure she'll listen to this stuff. So,
and I don't know anything.
Say.
Right? No, listen. I don't know anything about her as a person, so I'm not making that judgment. I don't know. I'm just saying.
You just don't like the whole deconstructing thing because you don't like the reasons people do it.
Right, but that's not just it. I've watched some of that person's content regarding the subject, and it's talking in circles. That's the
you
part
said that before, yeah.
That's the part that breaks my brain, is this kind of neo-Jewish, like we're asking questions that are answering themselves circle of, and I lack patience for that kind of talk. That's just honest.
Well, yeah, and I think we're a little different in that way. I think you place more value on having some more concrete basis for things, right?
It's not that. And here's the other thing I'm going to say throughout this podcast. I will end up sounding like Rob Bell, and I will end up saying some wishy-washy things, but that's just sometimes how I feel is the most effective way to communicate. And listen, my view as I get older and the more I experience God is my theology isn't either or. It's not predestination or free will. It's a knob, right? It's a knob, and it's a spectrum.
Is it a spectrum, Danny? Is it a spectrum?
Makes me want to barf that I think that. All right, but I do. It makes me want. And there's a part of me that wishes
it's a continuum. Let's use that word.
Yeah, that's because I don't think that either thing fits the whole truth. That I'm not some universalist, right? I don't think paths. That of course not. I'm very objective in that it's the gospel or nothing. But I tend to have, when it comes to non-gospel related theologies and non-gospel related, I'm very traditional and mainline in that regard. But when it comes to other things, I tend to have views that, and that's the number one thing that scares me about doing this podcast is one of my aunts or uncles or parents, God forbid, they listen to it and they go, you think there isn't necessarily an actual hell where people are going?
Yeah.
What? There's just eternal separation from God, and that's punishment enough. And you don't think there's probably not anyway, a literal burning pit. It's just probably not eternal separation from the creator, which, listen, if somebody's throwing a party, I at least want to be invited, right?
Yeah.
So if there's a party on the other side of this thing and I can't go, that's a problem, right?
The party being heaven.
Yeah, of course.
Which is also not something, an idea or a concept we really find in scripture, but details we can get into.
But I think that's true. So whether that heaven is new heaven, new earth, and that just means that we're all living on a planet in perfect bodies, I don't know. But I also don't.
Bodies.
I'm just saying.
We all do CrossFit and the keto diet.
We don't need to. In the new heaven, new earth, we don't have to do that. That's the whole.
But we look like we do.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, that's where we'll see.
Yeah.
That's where we'll see you and I are a little bit different. I have more tolerance, and even I've found refuge in that sort of thing, where
can't do it.
Where there is not as much certainty, and there is more of a asking of questions and less giving of answers when it comes to figuring out faith.
Yeah, I embrace the mystery of it, right? And I embrace that I'm not going to have all the answers. And I will say this much: I am uninterested in the never-ending pursuit of answers that I'm never going to understand. I think it's a waste of time. It's a waste of my time. I know that there is a God who created us, wants good things for us, and the whole gospel message. I agree with that, affirm it, believe it, and above and beyond that, it's all just noise, right? I think it's good and important and valuable to study and discuss. But there comes a point where you go, all right, we just think differently on the subject. I have these things, I call them the 3 rejections. And one of the things I've rejected, social conventions, obviously. I wasn't invited to the social conventions, so I'm rejecting them. And democracy. I'm not trying to convince anybody. I'm out of that business of trying to convince anyone of anything, whether it's political, spiritual, or otherwise. And so I find those conversations when I'm talking to, let's say, a Calvinist.
That was only 2 things you rejected. What was the third one? You said social conventions and democracy you've rejected. What's number 3?
I wrote it down somewhere. You'd think I would know this.
Okay, sorry to put you on the spot. I was listening and
I
didn't get a third point. I really like my 3-point sermon messages.
Right.
Especially if you give me a fill-in-the-blank sermon notes so I don't have to learn to think for myself. Praise God.
Never think for yourself. Thinking for yourself is dangerous.
Probably the enemy if you think for yourself.
Well, no. So the third rejection is the scarcity mindset.
Good. Okay.
I've adopted the the abundance mindset. There's always going to be more than enough for everything that you want.
Sure.
Um, there's no limit to God's grace, mercy, or generosity, and whatever it is you want out of this life. And I'm just going to say something that's probably controversial. I don't think it's offensive if you're a Christian person and you want fancy stuff.
Yeah.
Because we live in the first world already. So we're already doing better than every other Christian that ever walked this earth. Dude.
Well, you've always been a Joel Osteen fan.
Yeah.
I know you have a picture with him.
I made you go. We drove out to Houston for something called Colombian Fest to pick up Colombian chicks.
That was the whole point of why we went. Yeah. Literally.
And then we're supposed to leave Sunday morning. We check out of the hotel, and then you're like, all right, we're going to drive back to Austin. I was like, no, we're going to Lakewood.
And it was one of the best sermons I have ever heard. It wasn't even Joel preaching. It was some guest speaker and he was talking about how you can have a great chance of success being married.
Okay.
It stuck with me to this day. I loved it. So anytime I hear someone criticize Joel Osteen, I'm like, have you tried going to his church? Because
actually, like I've gone to his church now 3 or 4 times. Anytime I'm in Houston, if I'm in Houston on a weekend, I'll try to go to a Saturday night service at Lakewood. Listen, he's said and done some things that I go, I don't know if I would have said and done those things. But and here's the thing: for those pseudo progressive Christians who are like, the church is too white, which sometimes you had those opinions when we would go look at churches when we lived together. And I never cared. I never noticed, didn't care. Because I was like, they're not going to reject me because I'm brown. There's 1,000 other reasons they're going to ask me to not to. That's 10,000th on the list, I promise you. Walking into that church. Now, I moved thousands of miles away from trying to get anywhere near any Indian people. And I go to Houston, Texas, packed full of Malayalis. We walk into Lakewood. The first thing we see, 2 Indian guys there, 2 what we would say two Angles, talking Malayalam. And I was like, how did I go so far away? You walk into this church. You want to talk about ethnic diversity. Everybody's there. They're wearing the garb of their homeland. Yeah. The Nigerians are up in their corner. Of course, they're in the back. That. We're not going to have them up front, but you know.
Oh, no.
I'm kidding. Their worship guy was one of us. He was one of my cousins, probably. I just assumed.
Yeah, it was. And that's one thing you don't hear about his church a lot, is how ethnically diverse it was. All you ever hear is, all he cares about is money. But you kind of overlook some of the other things that people place importance on.
And he does it in a way that's not fake. But that's not.
We've seen the reverse side of that of overemphasizing diversity.
Yeah, and
to the point where it seemed like it wasn't genuine.
No, it's not that it's not just that it's not genuine. I'm a brown person. I'm just living my life. I don't think about it at all, right? But now I'm a token. Now I'm a character. I'm a character in your show, right? Now I'm tokenized.
Sure.
Now I don't. Now my thoughts are screw you.
Yeah, you want to be more than a demographic.
Yeah, I'm a whole entire person. So
you said something that I want to use to transition. You said that Joel Osteen.
If you're going to become a chick, dude, I don't know that I have the patience to do this with you.
Well, we can circle back to your thoughts later if you want to circle back. But right now, I'd like to make a segue.
Yeah, because I've seen your schlong, and if you chop that thing off, that is cursing God, I believe. Okay.
All right. So moving on to the next topic, you said that Joel Osteen has done and said some things you wouldn't necessarily agree with. So I want to talk about that because there are lots of things that pastors do and say that we wouldn't agree with, like all of the scandals we're going to talk about on this show. And I guess I want to talk about why, other than you loving a good scandal, why are we going to talk about major historical church scandals?
Because I think it is important. I think what has happened is we've deitized, if that can, if that's a word, pastors. We've
Deified, I think, would be the
deified. Yeah,
word,
there
but
you
I'm
go.
not an English
Yeah.
major.
We hoist them up on our shoulders. Because I still remember when I started coming to mega churches and people were like, Pastor so and so, and I was still just calling them by their first name.
Yeah.
And like I don't now, I'll do it, but it's really a courtesy. And I really want any pastor seeing this. If I've called you, if I've referred to you as pastor, it's a courtesy. And we witness these huge, massive churches, and they have these, the pastors have a human moment where,
Hmm.
and for some people, it's the moment their faith gets crushed, is because they've put their faith not
Yeah.
in the Christ, the author of our salvation. They put their faith in this guy or girl,
Hmm.
but the girl's usually, for some reason, evangelical church just completely sweeps it on the rug when it's a woman who does something wrong. But um, for a lot of people, they go, "Oh my goodness, my pastor's leaving the church. It turns out he might be gay." I mean, that's happened in several
Yeah, he's
seminars,
gay, he's an atheist, he cheated, whatever.
whatever. And they
And
go,
it
"Okay,
crushes their faith.
yeah." And that to
Crushes
me
them.
is it, and it's very simple. Your faith was in the wrong thing. So we as Christian people,
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think there's a lot of good reasons to leave the church and to walk away from your faith, and I think you could include those things.
yeah, but
If your faith is in the person, the pastor, the leader, yeah,
the
then
the
you're
the
right.
reason I say that's a dumb reason. There's some reasons I think that are where I'll go, okay, I can see where you're coming from, but when a pastor does something screwed up, they have a scandal, right? And my
Yep.
favorite scandal, which I don't think we're going to get to for a few weeks, is Ted Haggard,
Ted
right?
Hager. Yep.
I'm just going to spoil the joke now. Dude gets
Spoiler
caught.
alert.
Dude gets caught with a male Mary Magdalene and
That's a
meth.
prostitute.
Right, that's a whore. And he gets caught with a male whore and a bunch of meth, and he's going to fly out to some foreign country. To which I go, listen, if it was a female hooker and coke, you just like to party. And
Yeah.
we can restore that. But a male
We can do
hooker and
some
meth,
restoration training. Yeah.
that's rough. But I think that, and for me, it's this simple. If you screw up, if you're on the major stage and you screw up, all deference to you. God bless. I hope the best for you and your family. You're going to go sell insurance now. You're going to go buy a laundromat. You're going to go do
Hmm.
something that isn't this, because there's 1,000 other guys waiting in the wings to do the job. And let's put somebody else up to bat. It doesn't all have to be Barry Bonds juiced up till he's 60. We can find another guy. We can fill him up with the hormones too. So I'm just I and listen, if we can't, I feel, here's the problem. Growing up in church, I dealt with exclusively humorless old people who had no sense of humor about anything, couldn't have any fun. And then when my generation left their church, which is what happened to the church that I was raised in,
Right.
I had to have a meeting with them. And they were like, if you leave the church, like, if you leave and all the other people start leaving, we won't have another like we'll die. And I go, that's the market, my friend.
So yeah.
I mean, the market always corrects. I'm a believer
Yeah.
in free market
So,
science.
so
And so,
back to the scandals.
you know,
Back to the scandals. What I heard you saying is that pastors, church leaders are just people,
yeah,
and they have human moments, and maybe us, the congregation, has placed too much emphasis on them, and I would agree with that. That's the part that's what interests me about church scandals, is how heavily they affect the congregation. I love talking about church culture. I have unpopular opinions, so no one wants to listen. But I think the church scandals, they carry extra weight. Pastors and clergy, they're generally regarded as having a higher level of spiritual authority. They're acting as the mouthpiece of God. So when something happens, I do think a lot of people look at them like they're the mouthpiece of God. Your pastor they deliver a sermon message on Sunday. Whatever their interpretation of scripture is, that becomes the congregation's interpretation. Very, very seldomly does anyone go back to the Bible and try to say, was he even, understanding proper cultural and historical context? Does this make sense? Does it even apply to us? And if you are to do that, you're going to be excommunicated from the church because you're challenging the authority. So that's what's interesting to me is when these scandals happen and these leaders are shown to be just human like everyone else, everyone kind of loses it. There's a very interesting reaction. But I think to me and to you, it just kind of shows us maybe we have unrealistic expectations of our church leaders, and nobody really has more spiritual authority than we're assigning to them.
Right. And I would also add this to say it's like I lost my train of thought. But we've placed, I know what it is. When I first started attending an Assemblies of God church, and someone explained servant leadership to me.
Yeah.
And they explained it in detail. Can you just, you went to the AG University. Can you tell me what that is real quick?
So servant leadership is the concept that if you want to be a leader in the church, you do so by serving others. So if you want to be a leader in the church, you should sign up for our setup ministry, which is where you're going to put up chairs before service.
So the person,
it's the idea that you take a back seat before you get to be in the driver's seat.
Which, how rare is it that you've seen that, right?
The guy setting up chairs never become the executive pastor.
The guy setting up chairs never become anything more than the guy setting up chairs for 5 years straight.
Exactly.
And that's, so the explanation that I was told was, we're going to serve God by serving the pastor's vision for our church. That's what someone explained to me. And when I heard that, I thought, what kind of communist nonsense are you people? And so one thing that is always an affront to my spirituality and my faith is the conglomeration or corporatization of my faith and the robbing of me as an individual practicing and experiencing faith and practicing and experiencing God in my life. And it's become this corporate thing, and we are doing it together, and there is a corporate element to it. I'm not saying that's not true.
Right.
I'm just saying that's been placed in many experiences I've had. The corporate has been placed in front of the individual. And in the church that we helped plant that I ended up leaving, it was the
They were explicit about the corporate being more important
than the individual.
Than the individual.
I don't believe in, corporate salvation, and that's it.
Well, it's confusing to say the least, because the same church we went to that emphasized corporate involvement and corporate experience of God, they would also tell you that it's very important to have a personal relationship with Jesus. So then I'm like, what the fuck is going on? I don't know what you're talking about.
What do you want me to do here? Can you just, because it's always those competing messages that make me, in the inability, here's what really drives me nuts. It isn't the incongruence of the message. It's that everyone sitting around me that has a brain, that most of these people have good, decent jobs. Someone is paying them to do something, and they're not getting fired. Because if they're getting fired because they're stupid, then I can understand. But they're staying at these jobs, and they're
business owners, clearly, intelligent individuals, right?
And none of these people. And here's the other problem: is I have this belief that I'm an idiot. I don't know everything, and the older I get, the less I know. So if I'm stupid and I'm going, that doesn't make any freaking sense. What you just said makes no sense at all. And you people aren't doing anything about it.
Everyone's nodding their head and saying amen.
Everyone's just like, oh, I guess that's the way things are. And it's like, did your wife tighten your belt too tight? Like, is the circulation cut off from your body?
The khakis are... The polo shirt is too tucked into the khaki pants.
The Kirkland polo is tucked into the Kirkland khakis. I mean, we're going to talk about how young men and men are just decimated because of church at some point in one of these episodes. But did I cover everything on your call sheet?
You did. Let's talk about what your favorite scandals are, and then we can wrap it up. So, Danny, what can we look forward to for some of the scandals we're going to cover?
I mean,
and just to be clear too, it won't all be scandals.
Yeah.
We're probably going to go every other. It'll be like one episode's a scandal. The next is a piece of church culture we're addressing. But
correct.
What are some of the scandals you love?
Yeah. So just to address that, initially this was just going to be a one-off series where we just did here are the craziest 10 scandals in American church history, and that was it. And then I saw this guy's video, this rapper, Ruslan, a CHH rapper, who was doing YouTube videos, and I thought, oh, we have so much to add to this conversation. So my favorite church scandal of all time in American history is Ted Haggard. I love it.
As you've mentioned.
Here's a guy who is clearly bisexual at the very least. I'm not judging. Okay, I'm really not.
Right.
Whatever, dude. And can't admit it. Just, hey, bro, listen, it's really rough. You've never had any sort of other career. You're on in your years. There's these things called the coding camps where they teach you how to program computer languages. Go to one of them. It's $16,000, and you'll get a job making 70 or 80 grand afterwards. Stop trying to be a pastor. In the course of setting this podcast up and doing the research, I looked up Ted Haggard.
Which we've done very little, folks. Extremely little research.
Speak for yourself. I watched the 2 documentaries by Nancy Pelosi's daughter that are on HBO Max.
Yeah.
I don't watch anything else on HBO Max, obviously, because there's nipples, and those are bad.
Right.
God put them there, and he made them interesting to me for whatever reason. But don't look at them. Fascinated whenever I see one. And this guy did all this stuff. It was in the mid 2000s, and so I thought, okay, I'm just going to find these old articles, and I did find a bunch that were like, from whatever website. And but then there was a bunch of 2022 articles. I was like, that's weird, and I start clicking them. He did it again.
Oh, he did.
He got accused of doing it again.
All right, so Ted Haggard, he's done it. He's done it again.
Obviously,
two-time offender. What are some of your other favorites we're going to cover?
I mean, of course, just the Hillsong. There's so much there, right? That might be a two-parter. That could be a two-parter. I love the story of Hillsong, and I mean that sincerely. Even though I think in the next 5 years it's not going to exist anymore. I like the Mars Hill one. I like the Mars Hill one because
we're going to cover Mars Hill. Yeah.
What?
I don't understand the Mars Hill scandal, but we're going to get into it.
And I'm working my way through the existing Mars Hill, the rise and fall of Mars Hill, so I can give a reaction to it, because it's silly for us to do a podcast about Mars Hill and not address the existing 4-part multi-million download series or whatever about it. I think those. I mean, that encapsulates. I mean, listen, my uncle Ravi Zacharias. That was a rough one for
Ravi Zacharias. Yeah.
I'll tell you.
I didn't even know that when it happened. I always enjoyed listening to him. I was big into apologetics for a while, so he was a top guy for me.
Disliked him off rip. Never liked listening to my uncle.
You don't like listening to a lot of Indian guys, so that's not surprising.
True. I'll tell you something my uncle Ravi told me on a very special night. He said, just pick one. They all cost the same.
That's a preview of what scandal he got into. Who else is on here? Carl Lentz.
Yep.
We've got Carl Lentz.
Of course. Carl Lentz is part of the Hillsong scandal. So.
Yeah. This other guy, I can't say this guy's name.
Who?
The one I can't say. Julian
Trevadian, yeah.
Uh-huh.
He's the grandson or nephew of Billy Graham. Yeah, it just seems like his. I mean, we'll get into it when we talk about it.
We've got Perry Noble on here. Who's that? It was a preview.
Oh, well, Perry Noble was. What I love about all these guys is they have these they do these sermons about how great their marriage is, and then when the scandal breaks, Perry Noble had a drinking problem. All deference to him. I'm glad he got help. Ends up getting divorced. But the problem is, why'd you start a new church, Perry? Like the
gotta make money somehow, man.
Again, This is America. If you don't make money, you're a
Go
douchebag.
sell insurance, right? I know. You said it already.
Insurance, start a coffee shop. There's 1,000 other things you should be doing. Hey, start a podcast, write a book about the rise and
Sure.
fall of your own
Of
scandal.
yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, bro, if I was the head of the Hillsong guy that Houston,
hmm
bro, I'm writing a book and starting a podcast about the rise and fall of Hillsong. Hillsong is still a multi-million-dollar megachurch that's all over the country, all over the world.
Yeah.
Bro, you're gonna make so much more money if this is strictly about money, which I pray to God for a lot of you, it is pastors who are involved in scandals. Because if it's not and it's about ego, we're so much more doomed than I thought.
Well, okay.
Those are just a couple of the ones. Yeah.
We got Celebration Church
Yep.
from Lakeville, Minnesota. That's a local scandal that Danny and I grew up with. We have good friends who were deeply involved and affected by that scandal, so we may have some insider knowledge on that one.
Right, and I actually have insider knowledge because I know people that used to work there. So that was a funny one to me, and we'll get into the details of that one. But the guy who started that church is a prolific minister. It was his daughter that kind of had some trouble. And hey, by the way, just to throw this out there for anyone who's listening, if you are one of these pastors that we end up covering, or you're from one of the you're Mark Driscoll and we're talking about Mars Hill, shoot us an email, allpodmedia@gmail.com. We'd love to have you on here and discuss it. My goal,
Yeah.
I can't speak for everybody, I can't speak for Brett. My goal isn't to completely decimate your character. My goal is to just talk about this in a lighthearted manner so that other Christians learn, hey, this is just part of being a human being, okay?
Yeah. That's it.
So you misappropriated some funds and you yelled at some people.
It happens.
So you're John Christ and you get a girl to drink a bunch of vodka and go rollerblading.
It happens. We all
I
like
don't
to
even understand
rollerblade.
that one. So
We have what else? A couple others on the list. Looks like you got Josh Duggar on here. That's a particularly disgusting one, but we got to get into it. And then you've got Rob Bell, which I'm not even familiar with, other than him being generally controversial, what he did specifically to make our list. But those are just some of the ones we're going to cover.
He said there's no hell, but maybe we'll wrap him up with Carlton Pearson, who also said there is no hell.
Okay.
I mean, that was scandalous, and a lot of the scandal maybe wasn't even Rob Bell. It was the evangelical world's reaction to his.
I was in Bible college during the time. Yep.
Oh, what a time to be alive!
Love wins, right? Love wins.
I hate that that's become a phrase now. It
does. It might not win. We don't know.
What is love, though? What is love, baby?
Well, God is love, obviously, Danny. It says so in Scripture.
I can't go down this rabbit hole with you right now. But yeah.
Well, that's all the rabbit holes we have time for.
That's right. There's all sorts of holes that I like getting into, but we don't have time for that.
Oh, my God.
Well, Brett, it's time for us to conclude, and I just wanted to say one thing before letting you go. You're canceled.
Oh, thanks, Danny. You are also canceled.
Oh, thank you.